Blood trickled down Major James Ironwright's temple as he steadied himself on one knee. The vast alien arena spun around him, a blur of emerald-skinned faces and gleaming metal. Before him stood Niara, royal warrior princess of Astralis, towering at 9 feet tall. Her battle armor caught the alien sunlight as she raised her ceremonial blade high. "Is that all you have, Earthling?" Her voice boomed across the arena, deep and melodious even in its mockery. The crowd roared in approval, thousands of voices merging into a single deafening wave. Wright wiped the blood from his eye, his weathered face revealing nothing. 68 years of life had taught him patience. 3 decades in Special Force had taught him endurance. He planted his feet firmly in the red sand and raised his eyes to meet hers. "You think I'm finished?" His voice carried clear and steady across the suddenly quiet arena. "I haven't even started yet." 72 hours earlier, the rising Nevada sun painted long shadows across the security checkpoint. Wright scanned his badge and nodded to the younger guard, who straightened instinctively. 20 years since retirement, and soldiers still recognized the bearing of special forces. Old habits never truly died. The sprawling government facility looked like any other desert installation. Nondescript buildings, chain-link fences, and cameras tracking every movement. Wright had worked security here for 3 years, a position that kept his mind occupied without taxing his aging body. The routine suited him. The solitude suited him even better. His small office contained little beyond the essentials. A desk, a chair, monitors showing feed from various checkpoints, a faded photograph of his old Delta Force unit in Saudi Arabia 1991. Faces young and determined, unaware of how Operation Desert Storm would change them all. Wright was the only one still standing from that particular team. The price of survival was memory. The phone rang, breaking his routine. "Security Wright speaking. Major Wright, your presence is requested in briefing room A." The voice was crisp, official. Not the usual administrator. "I'm not a major anymore. Haven't been for 2 decades. Sir, this comes from the Joint Chiefs. Please proceed immediately." The Joint Chiefs. Wright felt a familiar tension settle between his shoulder blades. Nothing good ever came from that level of brass. He locked his station and moved through the facility with the methodical efficiency that had kept him alive through 3 conflicts and countless classified operations. Briefing room A contained 4 people. 2 wore military uniforms adorned with stars. 1 wore an expensive suit that screamed State Department. The fourth, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper posture, wore civilian clothes that nonetheless marked her as intelligence. "Major Wright," the intelligence woman stood offering her hand. "I'm Director Collins, Special Projects Division. Thank you for coming." "Not a major anymore, ma'am." Wright shook her hand firmly. "Just a security contractor these days. With respect, your retirement status is about to become irrelevant." She gestured to a chair. "Please sit. What we're about to discuss is classified beyond your current clearance." The suited diplomat placed a tablet on the table, activating a holographic display. "3 months ago, we made contact with an advanced civilization from the Proxima Centauri system. They call themselves the Astralis." The display showed beings that appeared humanoid, but stood nearly 9 feet tall. Their skin ranged from pale jade to deep emerald. Their features were sharp, elegant, and undeniably powerful. "First contact," Wright said flatly. "And you're telling a security guard because—" General Marcus, the older of the 2 military men, leaned forward. "Because they have requested an ambassador, someone to represent humanity in negotiations for a possible military alliance." "I'm not a diplomat." "No," Director Collins agreed. "You're something far more valuable. You're a survivor." The hologram shifted to show massive warships with designs unlike anything Wright had seen before. "The Astralis are a warrior culture, Major. They respect strength above all else. They're also in conflict with another species called the Draxan Collective, who have already declared humanity as their next conquest." "The Astralis have technology centuries beyond ours," the diplomat added. "Their alliance could save our planet, but they won't respect traditional diplomacy. They want someone who embodies what they call the warrior spirit." Wright looked at the faces around the table. "There are younger soldiers, better fighters." Director Collins slid a folder across the table. "We ran psychological profiles against the cultural parameters the Astralis provided. Your name came back as a 98% compatibility match. Why FOIM? Your record speaks for itself. Special Forces, Delta, multiple high-risk deployments in the Gulf War, the Scud hunting missions in '91 that required you to operate independently behind enemy lines for weeks, the hostage extraction in Kuwait that earned you the Silver Star. She paused, studying his face. But most importantly, your psychological profile shows something rare, the ability to adapt to impossible situations without breaking. Wright opened the folder. Inside was a single photograph of Earth taken from space, beautiful and fragile against the void. This isn't a request, is it? It's an opportunity to serve one last time, General Marcus said quietly. Possibly the most important service anyone has ever rendered to our country, to our planet. Wright stared at the photograph. He had no family left, few friends, nothing tying him to this world except memories of battles fought long ago. And yet, here was one more battle, perhaps the final one. When do I leave? The Australis ship hummed with power that Wright felt deep in his bones. The journey from Earth to their homeworld took mere hours through what they called fold space, a concept Earth physicists had barely begun to theorize about. He spent those hours studying briefing materials and trying to ignore the fact that he was the first human to travel beyond the solar system. The ship's interior was designed for beings much larger than humans. Wright felt like a child sitting in an adult's chair as he reviewed the cultural briefings. The Australis were a matriarchal society ruled by Queen Ilaria, who had led their people for over a century. Their warriors trained from childhood in combat techniques that combined raw physical power with technologies Earth scientists couldn't comprehend. Most troublingly, they had a complex code of honor that could turn deadly if violated intentionally or not. Wright had seen similar codes in tribal regions during his deployments. They always complicated missions. The ship shuddered slightly, interrupting his thoughts. The Australis navigator, a towering figure named Krell, appeared at the entrance to Wright's quarters. We approach Australis Prime Earth Warrior. Prepare yourself. Wright followed the navigator to the observation deck. What greeted him stole the breath from his lungs. A world unlike anything in human experience. Towers of crystal and metal rising miles into the sky, oceans of deep purple, and surrounding it all, a network of energy that seemed to cradle the planet like protective hands. Beautiful, Wright whispered the hardened soldier, momentarily overcome. It is the jewel of 7 systems, Krell agreed, and worth any price to protect. In that moment, Wright understood something crucial. Beneath their alien appearance and advanced technology, the Australis were motivated by the same primal drive that had launched a million human conflicts, the need to protect home. The landing was smooth, efficient. Wright was escorted by an honor guard of Australis warriors, each easily twice his weight and 2 feet taller. Their armor, a seamless combination of metal and what appeared to be living tissue, shifted with their movements like a second skin. The capital city was a marvel of engineering that made Earth's greatest metropolises look primitive by comparison. Structures of impossible geometry reached toward the crimson sky. Energy fields transported citizens between levels without visible mechanisms. And everywhere the Australis moved with the fluid grace of natural predators. Wright approached the royal palace with steady steps, ignoring the stares of the local population. He had been in hostile territory before. The key was to project calm confidence without aggression. Show no fear, but also no threat. The palace guards assessed him with professional detachment. One, clearly a veteran by the markings on his armor, stepped forward. You are smaller than expected, Earth Warrior. Wright met the guard's eyes, which glowed slightly in the alien light. Size isn't everything. The guard's face remained impassive, but something like respect flickered in those luminous eyes. Indeed, follow. The throne room of Queen Ilaria was a vast chamber that combined military precision with artistic beauty. Banners depicting what Wright assumed were historic battles hung from soaring arches. The floor was a single piece of polished stone that reflected the light from energy orbs floating overhead. And at the far end, seated on a throne, carved from what appeared to be the fossilized remains of some enormous creature, was Queen Ilaria herself. Even among her species, she was impressive. Standing, she would likely reach 10 feet tall. Her skin was the color of deep jade, and her eyes held the wisdom of extreme age, coupled with the sharpness of a tactical mind. She wore armor that seemed ceremonial, yet functional, adorned with symbols of rank and achievement. Beside her throne stood a female warrior whose resemblance to the queen marked her as Princess Niara. Where the queen projected regal power, Niara radiated, barely contained ferocity. Her armor bore fresh marks of combat, and her eyes tracked right with the intensity of a predator assessing potential prey. On the queen's other side stood a male Astralis, whose armor outshone all others. General Thorm Wright recognized from his briefings, the military leader of all Australis forces and chief advisor to the Queen. Wright approached the throne and stopped at the designated distance. He offered the formal Australis greeting he had been taught, right fist pressed to left shoulder and inclined slightly. Queen Ilaria of the sovereign Australis Empire, I bring greetings from Earth and gratitude for your willingness to consider alliance in these troubled times. The Queen's voice was surprisingly gentle for a being of such imposing size. Major James Wright of Earth's Special Forces, your journey honors us. General Thorm made a sound somewhere between a scoff and a growl. This is Earth's champion, their warrior representative. He circled Wright, assessing him with undisguised skepticism. I expected someone more substantial. Wright remained still, allowing the inspection without reaction. He had been underestimated before. It usually worked to his advantage. Queen Ilaria raised a hand, silencing Thorm. The human stands before us by invitation, General. Remember protocol. Thorm stepped back, but his displeasure remained evident. Of course, my queen, I merely question whether this specimen truly represents the best Earth has to offer. Wright spoke directly to the queen, ignoring Thorm. I assure you, your majesty, what humans lack in size, we compensate for in other areas. Princess Niara let out a short musical laugh, spoken like one accustomed to making such compensations. Her voice was surprisingly melodic, though edged with mockery. The queen silenced her daughter with a look before addressing Wright again. Your planet faces annihilation, Major Wright. The Draxan Collective has already charted course for your solar system. Without our intervention, humanity will be extinct within one Earth year. So we've been told, Your Majesty, hence my presence. Indeed, yet alliance with Australis is not given lightly. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly. We must know that humans possess the warrior spirit necessary to stand beside us against the Draxan. A species that cannot defend itself is not worth saving. Wright recognized the test beneath her words. Humanity has fought countless wars throughout our history, Your Majesty, often against enemies with superior numbers or weapons. Yet you have never faced an enemy like the Draxan, Thorm interjected. They consume worlds, Major Wright, literally consume them down to the molten core. All the more reason for alliance, General. Queen Ilaria studied Wright with ancient eyes. Before such discussions can proceed, there is the matter of your status. You claim the rank of warrior among your kind. I served in my country's special forces for 30 years, Your Majesty. I've seen combat across multiple operations. During Desert Storm, I led a team operating 100 miles behind enemy lines for 3 weeks, locating and designating mobile missile launchers for airstrikes. Thorm circled again, his massive arms crossed over his armored chest. Combat against other humans, hardly a measure of true warrior capability. Wright finally turned to face the general directly. With respect, General, the enemy makes little difference. Combat is combat. Survival is survival. Is it? Thorm stopped looming over Wright. Would you stake the future of your world on that claim? The atmosphere in the throne room shifted. Wright sensed a carefully laid trap springing shut. I'm here to negotiate an alliance, General, not to prove personal combat prowess. Queen Ilaria leaned forward slightly. Unfortunately, Major Wright, among the Australis, the two cannot be separated. Our law is clear. All diplomatic relations must be preceded by the recognition of equals. Wright recalled this from his briefing materials. A ceremonial acknowledgement between species. I'm prepared for the recognition ceremony, Your Majesty. A smile that held no warmth crossed Thorm's face. The recognition is not merely ceremonial for potential military allies, Earthman. It requires proof of warrior spirit through the Australis challenge. Princess Niara stepped forward, her movement fluid and predatory. The challenge is combat, Major Wright. One representative from each species fighting under sacred rules to prove their worthiness for alliance. Wright kept his expression neutral, though his mind raced through implications. Combat to what end, Princess? Not to death, Queen Ilaria assured him. The challenge ends when one combatant yields or is rendered incapable of continuing. And if I decline, Thorm's satisfaction was palpable, then you return to Earth empty-handed and your species awaits extinction. Wright weighed his options quickly. He was fit for his age, but he was still 68 facing aliens in their physical prime who stood 3 feet taller and likely possessed several times his strength. The odds were overwhelmingly against him. But then the odds had never been in his favor. Not in the mountains of Kuwait, when his team was surrounded by Republican Guard. Not when he led the extraction of 3 downed pilots with only a 4-man team. And yet, here he stood. I accept the challenge, Wright said calmly. Queen Ilaria nodded with what might have been approval. It is decided. The challenge will commence at first light tomorrow. You will be provided quarters to rest and prepare. As the court began to disperse, Princess Niara approached Wright. Up close, her height was even more imposing, forcing him to tilt his head back to meet her gaze. You have made a grave mistake, Earth Warrior, she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. No off-worlder has ever survived the challenge. Wright held her gaze. There's a first time for everything, Princess. Something flickered across her expression. Surprise, perhaps, at his lack of fear. You are either very brave or very foolish. I've been called both. She studied him a moment longer. It changes nothing. Tomorrow you will face our champion, and you will fall. Wright watched her stride away, heard the movements betraying the lethal training beneath the royal demeanor. He had faced enough opponents to recognize one sizing him up. The princess had been assessing him, but why, if she wasn't to be his opponent, why the personal interest, a smaller Australis, though still nearly 7 feet tall, approached and bowed slightly. Major Wright, I am Zorn, assigned as your guide during your stay. Please follow me to your quarters. As they walked through the palace corridors, Wright noted the military precision of guard positions, the strategic placement of what appeared to be weapon systems disguised as architectural elements. The Australis were warriors to their core, their entire civilization built around combat readiness. Zorn, what can you tell me about the challenge tomorrow? Who will I be facing? The guide hesitated, then spoke in a lowered voice. The champion is always chosen by the Council of Generals led by General Thorm. It is unusual for the challenge to be invoked for diplomatic relations. This is General Thorm's doing. Why would he want this? Zorn's eyes darted around, checking for listeners. There are factions within the court, Major Wright. Not all agree with the Queen's decision to consider alliance with Earth. And Thorm leads the opposition. I have said too much already. Zorn stopped before an ornate door. These are your quarters. You will find refreshments and bathing facilities inside. Rest well, Earth Warrior. You will need your strength tomorrow. Wright entered the chamber, which was proportioned for Australis, but contained a few items clearly adjusted for human use. He inspected the space with the habitual caution of a soldier in potentially hostile territory. No obvious surveillance devices, but in a civilization, this advanced observation could be happening through means he couldn't detect. He found what appeared to be a communication device similar to the one he'd been given on the journey. It connected directly to Earth's Special Projects Division. Wright activated it, and Director Collins's face appeared in a small hologram. Major Wright report status. I'm in the palace, Director. Quarters are comfortable enough, but there is a complication. He explained the challenge and the political undercurrents he'd detected. Collins frowned. Our Australis cultural advisors warned this might happen. General Thorm has opposed contact with Earth from the beginning. Any advice for fighting an opponent twice my size with unknown capabilities? Unfortunately, no. Our information on Australis combat techniques is limited. She hesitated. Major, if this is unwinnable. With respect, Director, I've faced unwinnable scenarios before. During the hostage extraction in Kuwait, we were outmanned 15-1. We still completed the mission with no casualties on our side. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. That's why your profile matched, Major. Get some rest. And good luck. The communication ended, leaving Wright alone with his thoughts. He moved to the window, gazing out at the alien cityscape now illuminated by artificial lights that seemed to flow like liquid through architectural elements. Somewhere out there, preparations were being made for tomorrow's challenge. His opponent was likely being selected strategies discussed. Wright closed his eyes, calling upon decades of training. He began the mental preparation techniques that had sustained him through countless missions, clearing his mind, focusing his awareness, preparing his body for what was to come. When he opened his eyes again, his reflection in the window showed what his enemies had learned to fear: the calm, calculated focus of a man who had survived the unsurvivable. They called him Iron Wright not for his strength, but for his unbreakable will. Size wasn't everything. The Australis were about to learn that lesson. Dawn on Australis brought a sky of deep crimson streaked with gold. Wright stood on the balcony of his quarters as completing the stretching routine that had been part of his morning for 50 years. His body protested more than it once had, old injuries making themselves known, but the discipline remained. A soft chime announced Zorn's arrival. The guide entered and stopped watching Wright's methodical movements with curiosity. "This is your preparation for combat, these gentle motions." Wright completed his routine before responding. "Flexibility and circulation first, power second." "An interesting approach." Zorn offered a bundle of fabric. "These are traditional garments for the challenge. They have been adjusted for your proportions." The clothing consisted of a simple sleeveless tunic and loose pants, both made of material that felt like leather but breathed like cotton. A belt of interlocking metal plates completed the outfit. "No armor?" Wright asked. "The challenge is fought unarmored," Zorn explained. "It is a test of natural ability, not technology." Wright nodded. That at least might work in his favor. Less protection meant his opponent would also be more vulnerable if he could find a weak point. "The arena awaits Major Wright. The court has gathered. It is time." Wright followed Zorn through corridors that grew progressively wider until they emerged into a vast circular space open to the sky. The arena was simple in design, a sunken fighting area surrounded by rising tiers of seats now filled with Australis of various ranks. Their murmurs created a constant background hum like distant thunder. At the highest point sat Queen Ilaria, on a portable throne, Princess Niara and General Thorm flanking her. Diplomatic representatives from other species occupied seats of honor nearby. Wright recognized a few from his briefings, but many were completely alien to him. Zorn led him to an entrance at arena level. "When your name is called, you will enter and proceed to the center. The challenge begins when the Queen's crystal is raised." "And my opponent," a smile that contained something like pity crossed Zorn's face, "will enter from the opposite side. May your warrior spirit guide you, Major Wright." Left alone, Wright centered himself with the breathing techniques that had kept him functional through the worst combat situations. The crowd noise dimmed in his awareness as he focused inward, taking inventory of his body, his surroundings, his options. A resonant tone silenced the crowd. The Queen's voice, amplified by unseen technology, filled the arena. "Today we witness the sacred challenge as old as the stars themselves. Earth seeks alliance with Australis against our common enemy. Their representative stands ready to prove humanity's warrior spirit." Wright took that as his cue and walked steadily into the arena. The red sand crunched beneath his boots, the only concession to his Earth equipment that had been permitted. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Murmurs, some laughter, clearly responding to his relatively small stature. He reached the center and stood calmly, hands at his sides, facing the royal box. The Queen acknowledged him with a slight nod before continuing. "As is our sacred tradition, the challenger shall face a champion of Australis. Should the Earth warrior demonstrate sufficient skill and spirit, the path to alliance shall be opened." General Thorm rose beside the Queen. "As head of the Council of Generals, it falls to me to name our champion." His voice carried a note of triumph that Wright instantly distrusted. "The honor of Australis shall be defended by—" The arena fell completely silent, every Australis seeming to hold their breath. "Princess Niara, royal heir and blade master of the 7 techniques." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Even from a distance, Wright could see Queen Ilaria's posture stiffen in surprise. This was unexpected, perhaps even to her. Princess Niara rose slowly, her expression unreadable at this distance. Wright processed this development quickly. Fighting royalty complicated matters. If he somehow won, would it be seen as an insult? If he lost too easily, would Earth be dismissed as weak? The political calculations were as important as the tactical ones. Princess Niara descended from the royal box, her movements graceful despite her size. She appeared at the opposite arena entrance, now dressed in similar unarmored clothing to Wright's. Even without her royal armor, she was an imposing figure, nearly 9 feet of toned muscle and lethal training. As she approached the center to stand before Wright, the size difference became almost comical. The top of his head barely reached her chest. Her expression remained stern, but he caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Perhaps uncertainty. "I did not expect to face royalty," Wright said quietly for her ears only. "Nor I to face an elder," she replied. "This is Thorm's doing. He means to humiliate both of us." Before Wright could respond, Queen Ilaria raised a crystal staff that caught the morning sunlight, fracturing it into rainbow patterns across the sand. The challenge begins. Niara moved with shocking speed, covering the distance between them in a single bound. Her first strike was a sweeping kick aimed at Wright's legs, not a killing move, but one designed to end the fight quickly by putting him on the ground. Wright had anticipated this. Against a larger opponent, staying on your feet was priority one. He jumped, tucking his legs, the kick passing harmlessly beneath him. As he landed, he rolled away, creating distance. The crowd murmured in surprise. They had expected him to fall immediately. Niara's eyes narrowed, reassessing. She advanced more cautiously now, her hands up in a fighting stance that reminded Wright of classical martial arts from Earth, though with adjustments for her different physiology. She launched a series of strikes, punches and open-handed blows that displaced air with audible cracks. Wright evaded rather than blocked, knowing a single clean hit from those powerful limbs could break bones. For several minutes they continued this dance, Niara attacking with controlled power, Wright evading with economical movements. He made no offensive moves, focusing entirely on survival and observation. The crowd grew restless. From the royal box, General Thorm's voice boomed. "Is this how Earth warriors fight, Major Wright? By running?" Wright ignored the taunt, his focus entirely on Niara. He was studying her patterns, noting the subtle tells before each attack. More importantly, he was watching her breathing, the slight changes in her movements as the fight extended. An opening appeared, a fractional overextension on a roundhouse kick. Wright ducked under it and for the first time countered. His strike targeted a point just below her ribcage, a precise blow to what would be a solar plexus on a human. The hit landed clean. Niara's breath escaped in a surprised huff, and she staggered back a half step. The crowd fell silent. Wright immediately created distance again, not pressing his advantage. This wasn't about winning with a lucky shot. This was about surviving long enough to make his point. Niara recovered quickly, but her expression had changed. The dismissive confidence was gone, replaced by focused concentration. She circled Wright, moving with more precision now. "You are more skilled than you appear, Earth Warrior," she said quietly. "As I said, size isn't everything." Her next assault was more measured, combining strikes into complex combinations designed to trap him against the arena wall. Wright was forced to block some blows, each impact sending shockwaves of pain through his arms. Her strength was tremendous. 20 minutes into the fight, Wright had landed 3 more strategic counters while avoiding the worst of Niara's offense, but the pace was taking its toll. At 68, his endurance wasn't what it once had been. His breathing grew heavier, his reactions fractionally slower. Niara noticed. "You tire Major Wright. It is no dishonor to yield." "Not yet," he managed between breaths. The princess pressed her advantage, increasing the tempo. A strike got through Wright's guard, catching him on the shoulder and spinning him around. Another blow to his back sent him stumbling forward. The crowd roared, sensing the end. Wright regained his balance and turned to face Niara again. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye where he'd been caught by a glancing blow. His left shoulder throbbed where her strike had landed, but he remained standing. Niara paused, genuine surprise crossing her features. "Why continue? You've shown courage. Yield now with honor." Wright wiped blood from his eye. "The fight isn't over until it's over, Princess." Something like respect flickered in her eyes. She attacked again, but Wright noticed something crucial. Her movements had slowed slightly. Her breathing was more labored. The sustained combat was affecting her as well. This confirmed what Wright had suspected from watching the Australis guards. Their physiology was optimized for explosive power, not extended endurance. Like heavyweight boxers or powerlifters on Earth, they weren't built for marathon efforts. Wright had spent his career training for exactly that, outlasting the enemy when you couldn't overpower them. The Desert Storm operations had often required moving for days with minimal rest. His training had emphasized function through extreme physical stress. He adjusted his strategy, focusing on movement, making Niara work for every engagement. When she connected, he absorbed the blows as best he could, but never stopped moving, never allowed her to land the fight-ending strike she sought. An hour into the challenge, the dynamics had shifted noticeably. Niara's attacks came less frequently with longer pauses between combinations. Her legendary speed had diminished as her muscles fatigued. Wright was injured and exhausted, but still moving with deliberate purpose. The crowd had fallen into stunned silence. This was not the quick demonstration of Astralis superiority they had expected. In the royal box, Queen Ilaria leaned forward, watching with intense focus. Beside her, General Thorm's expression had darkened from confidence to concern. Niara launched another attack, but her timing was off. Wright sidestepped and executed a precise leg sweep, a technique that would never work on a fresh Astralis, but against Niara's now sluggish movements connected perfectly. The princess crashed to the sand with an impact that sent vibrations across the arena floor. The crowd gasped collectively. Wright stepped back, allowing her space to rise. Niara pushed herself up sand, clinging to her sweat-dampened skin. For the first time, real uncertainty showed in her eyes. "What are you?" she asked, her voice low and strained. "Just a soldier who learned the hard way that sometimes victory goes not to the strongest, but to the last one standing." Niara gathered herself and attacked again, but the precision was gone. Her movements were fueled more by determination than technique now. Wright avoided the worst of it, though a glancing blow to his ribs sent a spike of pain through his side. 2 hours into the challenge, the impossible was happening. Princess Niara, undefeated champion of the Astralis, was visibly exhausted. Her attacks came slower, her breathing ragged. Wright was in little better shape, his aged body pushed to its limits, but decades of training kept him moving, kept him fighting. The crowd had moved from silence to murmurs of disbelief. This was unprecedented. Wright saw his opening during an increasingly desperate attack from Niara. As she lunged forward, he stepped inside her reach, using her momentum against her. A technique from his Special Forces close combat training, adapted on the fly for his much larger opponent. He locked her extended arm, twisted, and used leverage rather than strength to take her down to the sand. In one fluid motion, he secured a joint lock that would be excruciating regardless of species. Niara froze, her face contorted in pain and shock. Wright maintained the hold, applying just enough pressure to demonstrate control without causing serious injury. "Yield," he said quietly. Pride and disbelief warred in her expression. "Impossible." "Yield, princess. There's no shame in it." For a moment it seemed she would continue to resist. Then her free hand slapped the sand 3 times, the universal signal of submission. Wright released the hold immediately and stepped back, his chest heaving with exertion. The arena remained absolutely silent, thousands of Astralis frozen in collective shock. Then Queen Ilaria rose from her throne. "The challenge is complete. The Earth Warrior stands." Tradition dictated that the winner help the defeated to their feet. Wright approached Niara, who still knelt in the sand, and offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, though she hardly needed his strength to rise. Standing together at the center of the arena, the contrast in their size made his victory seem even more improbable. The silence stretched until General Thorm's voice cut through it. "A technical victory only," he declared, "gained through evasion, not warrior prowess." Queen Ilaria's response was immediate and firm. "The challenge has no conditions beyond victory, General. Major Wright has demonstrated the warrior spirit of humanity through his performance today." Wright turned to face the royal box, still standing beside Niara. "With respect, Your Majesty, General Thorm is partially correct. My victory wasn't about strength. It was about endurance and adaptation, qualities humans have developed through thousands of years of survival on a world that constantly tried to kill us." The Queen studied him with new interest. "You speak wisdom, Major Wright. Perhaps there is more for our peoples to learn from each other than we anticipated." She raised her hands, addressing the crowd. "The path to alliance is opened. Let preparations begin for formal negotiations." As the crowd began to disperse, still buzzing with the unexpected outcome, General Thorm approached Queen Ilaria. Though Wright couldn't hear their words, the general's aggressive posture and the queen's dismissive response made the disagreement clear. Beside Wright, Princess Niara had regained some of her composure. "You fought with honor, Major Wright. Few would have predicted this outcome. You're a formidable opponent, Princess. On Earth, you would be unbeatable. Yet here, you prevailed." She studied him with newfound respect. "There is more to your species than appears." Before Wright could respond, Zorn appeared at his side, his expression troubled. "Major Wright, Princess Niara, you are both summoned to the ritual chamber immediately." Wright noted the concern in Zorn's voice. "What ritual?" Niara's posture suddenly stiffened. "The rite of victory. It cannot be." Zorn nodded grimly. "General Thorm has invoked the ancient law. The Queen cannot interfere." "What ancient law?" Wright asked, a sense of foreboding growing. Niara's eyes met his, filled with a complex mixture of emotions. "The law of conquest, Major Wright. It is our oldest tradition, rarely invoked in modern times." "And what does it mean?" Zorn glanced around nervously before lowering his voice. "It means, Major Wright, that by defeating the princess in sacred challenge, you have claimed more than victory." "You have claimed me," Niara finished, her voice flat. "By our most ancient law, I am now bound to you as battlemate and consort." Wright stared at her in disbelief. "That's not possible. There was nothing about this in my briefing materials." "Because it is an archaic law preserved but almost never invoked." Niara's voice held barely controlled anger. "Until today, when Thorm saw an opportunity to create chaos." Wright understood immediately. This wasn't just about humiliating him or the princess. This was about derailing the alliance negotiations entirely by creating an impossible diplomatic situation. "There must be a way to decline this honor," he said carefully. "To reject the right of victory would be to reject the victory itself," Zorn explained. "It would invalidate the challenge, and with it, Earth's bid for alliance." Wright met Niara's gaze. "I'm sorry, Princess. This was not my intention." A complex emotion crossed her face. "Nor mine, Earth Warrior. But we are both now pawns in Thorm's greater game." Guards approached their ceremonial armor, indicating this was indeed an official summons. Wright and Niara had no choice but to follow them toward whatever ceremony awaited, and the diplomatic crisis Thorm had engineered. As they walked, Wright's mind raced through options. The mission was clear: secure the alliance with Astralis to save Earth from the Draxan threat. Everything else, including this unexpected complication, was secondary. He had survived the harshest desert conditions with minimal supplies. He had evaded enemy patrols for weeks behind enemy lines. He would survive this too, whatever it took. The guards led them through corridors Wright hadn't seen before, deeper into the palace complex. Around them, whispers and stares followed their progress. The human who had defeated Princess Niara and the princess herself, now bound by an ancient law, neither had anticipated. They reached an ornate doorway inscribed with symbols that glowed with inner light. Beyond it lay the next challenge, not physical this time, but diplomatic and cultural. Wright squared his shoulders and prepared to face whatever came next. For Earth, he would find a way through this maze of alien politics and tradition. He had come too far to fail now. The ritual chamber pulsed with ancient energy. Crystal formations jutted from walls of polished obsidian, their light casting strange patterns across the assembled Astralis nobility. Queen Ilaria sat upon a ceremonial throne, her expression carefully neutral, despite the diplomatic catastrophe unfolding before her. General Thorm stood to one side, satisfaction radiating from his massive frame. The trap had been sprung perfectly. Either Earth would reject the ancient law and lose the alliance, or accept it and create an interspecies incident involving royalty. Wright and Niara stood before the Queen, the contrast in their heights almost comical were it not for the gravity of the situation. A wizened Astralis elder approached carrying a ceremonial blade that seemed to drink the light around it. "The law of conquest stands unbroken since the first dynasty." The elder intoned, his voice carrying despite its age. "The victor claims the vanquished in honorable bond. What was two shall become one." Wright maintained his composure, though inwardly his mind raced through diplomatic options. This ceremony hadn't been in any briefing. Earth's xenologists hadn't prepared him for becoming accidentally married to an alien princess. The elder raised the blade. Blood must recognize blood. Hand forth conqueror and claimed. Niara extended her arm with stiff formality. Right followed suit. The elder drew the blade across their palms in swift, precise movements. Pain flashed sharp and immediate. Their blood, Wright's crimson, Niara's a startling, deep purple, dripped onto a crystal basin below. The bond is sealed, the elder declared as their mingled blood touched the crystal, causing it to emit a soft glow. By ancient law and modern witness, Princess Nera and Major Wright are united in the bond of conquest. The assembled nobility erupted in murmurs. Some appeared scandalized, others amused. Queen Ilaria's face remained impassive, but her eyes briefly met Wright's, communicating volumes. This was not what she had wanted, but she was bound by tradition to accept it. General Thorm stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber. Let the record show that Earth's representative has claimed Australis royalty through combat. The implications for our negotiations are significant. His words dripped with false concern. Wright finally spoke, his steady voice cutting through the murmurs. With respect to Australis tradition, this outcome was neither sought nor expected. Earth came seeking alliance against a common enemy, not to claim individuals. Yet claim you did, Thorm countered smoothly. Our most sacred laws cannot be set aside for diplomatic convenience. Queen Ilaria raised a hand for silence. What's done is done. The bond stands. She fixed her gaze on Wright. Major Wright, you and the princess will retire to the royal quarter. Tomorrow we shall address how this development affects our negotiations. Guards stepped forward to escort them. Wright caught sight of Zorn's worried face among the attendants. The situation had escalated beyond anyone's control, except perhaps Thorm's. As they walked the crystal-lined corridors, Wright noticed Niara's rigid posture, the controlled fury evident in every step. He maintained a respectful distance, sensing that any attempt at conversation would be unwelcome. They arrived at an ornate doorway that slid open silently at their approach. Inside lay chambers of breathtaking luxury, living areas scaled for Australis, but with touches that suggested hasty human accommodations. The doors sealed behind them with an ominous finality. They were alone. Niara immediately strode to the far side of the main chamber, putting maximum distance between them. She turned, her eyes blazing with barely contained rage. Do you understand what has happened, Earthman? Wright met her gaze calmly. I understand I've been maneuvered into a diplomatic trap, Princess. And so have you. This is beyond diplomatic inconvenience. Her voice trembled with fury. I am bound to you. The royal bloodline is bound to a human, Wright finished for her. An alien. She began pacing, her powerful form radiating dangerous energy. Thorm has achieved what years of political maneuvering could not. He has removed me from succession consideration while creating an impossible situation for your world's alliance hopes. Wright considered her words carefully. The succession is at risk because of this bond. Niara laughed bitterly. A future queen bound to an off-worlder, the military council would never accept it. She stopped pacing to stare at him. This chamber is the only thing keeping you alive right now. If you stepped outside alone, Thorm's loyalists would ensure you suffered an unfortunate accident. Then we're both prisoners. Precisely. She gestured to the luxurious surroundings, gilded prisoners in a cage of tradition. Wright moved to the window, gazing out at the alien cityscape now bathed in the light of Australis' setting sun. The diplomatic mission was unraveling before it had properly begun. There must be a way to dissolve this bond, he said. Niara joined him at the window, though keeping a careful distance. There are 3 ways the bond of conquest can be broken. Death of either party. Mutual renunciation before the High Council, which would shame both our peoples and end alliance hopes. Or, when she didn't continue, Wright turned to face her, or, her expression tightened, completion and transcendence of the bond. A spiritual evolution that can only be achieved through shared battle triumph. And she stopped abruptly. Wright understood the implication. I see. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Wright broke it, first changing the subject. Thorm orchestrated this perfectly. The challenge, the invocation of ancient law. He must have been planning this for some time. Niara's expression shifted from anger to thoughtful analysis. Yes, he's opposed Mother's outreach to Earth from the beginning. He believes we should conquer rather than ally. And the Draxon threat, very real. She moved to an information panel on the wall, activating it with a gesture. A three-dimensional star map appeared, highlighting a massive fleet moving through space. The Draxon Collective consumes worlds. They strip planets of resources, leaving nothing behind. Your Earth is directly in their expansion path. Wright studied the projection. Then, despite our situation, the alliance remains necessary for both our peoples. Yes, Niara deactivated the map, but Thorm would rather see Earthfall than share Astralis technology. He fears your species' potential. Based on what? Her eyes met his, evaluating. Based on you, Major Wright. A physically inferior specimen who nonetheless defeated our greatest warrior through unexpected means. Wright considered this. Endurance and adaptability, the hallmarks of human survival. Precisely what Thorm fears. Niara moved to a seating area, gesturing for Wright to join her. As he sat across from her, the size disparity between them was again apparent. Tell me about your training. How did you defeat me? Wright recognized the question as both personal and strategic. Special Forces training emphasizes outlasting the enemy. In Desert Storm, we operated behind enemy lines for weeks with minimal support. During the Scud hunting missions, my team had to remain constantly mobile, sleeping in 2-hour rotations, keeping track of missile launchers that moved daily. Niara leaned forward slightly. You were in actual war then? Yes, the liberation of Kuwait in 1991 was my first major conflict. I led a team tasked with locating mobile missile sites that were targeting our allies. We spent 3 weeks in enemy territory, constantly evading patrols, surviving on minimal rations and sleep. Our warriors trained for explosive power, Niara admitted. Quick, decisive victories through overwhelming force. The concept of combat extending for hours is alien to us. Different evolutionary paths, different strengths, Wright offered. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We couldn't outfight the megafauna of prehistoric Earth, but we could outlast them, run them to exhaustion over days. Understanding dawned in Niara's eyes. That was your strategy against me. Wright nodded. I observed the Astralis guards during my arrival. Your people move with incredible power, but there's a rhythm to it. Bursts of energy followed by recovery. I suspected prolonged exertion might be your weakness. Clever. There was grudging respect in her voice. But it doesn't solve our current predicament. No, Wright agreed, but it suggests Thorm has underestimated humans in more ways than one. Niara rose abruptly, moving to another panel. We should rest. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. She manipulated controls, causing a portion of the chamber to reconfigure. This area will accommodate your human physiology for sleep. Wright recognized the dismissal. Thank you, Princess. As he moved toward the designated sleeping area, Niara's voice stopped him. Major Wright, he turned to face her. You fought with honor today. Her expression remained stern, but some of the earlier hostility had faded. Remember that honor when Thorm makes his next move. He will not stop until Earth's alliance hopes are crushed and my mother's progressive policies with them. Wright nodded once. I've faced desperate situations before, Princess. We'll find a way through this one. I hope your optimism is justified, she replied softly before retreating to her own quarters. Alone, Wright examined the sleeping area, finding it surprisingly well adapted for human needs, despite its alien design. He completed his nightly routine with military precision, the habits of decades unbroken, even in these extraordinary circumstances. As he lay in the strange bed, staring at an alien ceiling, Wright reflected on how far he'd come from the Nevada security checkpoint just days ago. Earth's fate now balanced on his ability to navigate not just alien politics, but apparently alien matrimony as well. He'd faced worse odds. Probably. Morning came with an insistent chiming. Wright woke instantly, decades of military readiness allowing no gradual transition from sleep. He found Astrala's clothing size for him laid out nearby, more formal than the combat garments with symbols he didn't recognize adorning the shoulders. He dressed quickly and entered the main chamber to find Niara already awake, studying information displays with intense focus. She wore ceremonial armor that accentuated her powerful physique while symbolizing her royal status. The military council convenes in 1 hour, she said without preamble. Thorm has called an emergency session to discuss the implications of our bond. Wright moved to examine the displays. They showed various Australis officials, their names and affiliations listed in a script his translator rendered into English. You're mapping the political landscape, identifying potential allies and enemies. Niara gestured to different figures. These 5 council members are firmly in Thorm's camp. These 3 support my mother unconditionally. The others, she waved her hand dismissively, political creatures who follow power. The same on Earth, Wright remarked. Some things are universal. A chime announced a visitor. Zorn entered carrying what appeared to be breakfast. As he set the tray down, he spoke in a low voice. The palace buzzes with rumors. General Thorm has been meeting with military officials through the night. Some say he questions the Queen's judgment in pursuing alliance with Earth. Wright accepted a cup of what appeared to be a tea-like beverage. Not surprising, has Earth been notified of developments? Zorn glanced at Niara, who nodded permission. Your Director Collins has been informed of the ceremonial bond. She requests direct communication when possible. Arrange it, Niara commanded, after the council session. When Zorn departed, Wright turned to Niara. What should I expect from this session? Political theater designed to humiliate us both and undermine the alliance. She straightened her armor with practiced movements. Thorm will focus on the impropriety of our bond while questioning Earth's worthiness as an ally. How should we counter? Niara's lips curved in the smallest hint of a smile. By denying him the reaction he seeks. Together we present a united front. No visible discord between us. Wright nodded. Understood. We've been maneuvered into this position together. We'll face it together. Something shifted in Niara's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at his ready agreement. Good. She moved toward the door. Follow my lead in the council chamber. Speak only when directly addressed. As they left their quarters, royal guards fell into formation around them. Wright noted their positioning, not just ceremonial, but tactical. They were as much protection as escort. They proceeded through grand corridors where Australis of various ranks stopped to stare at the unlikely pair. The towering warrior princess and the comparatively tiny human. Wright kept his posture straight and his expression neutral, feeling the weight of countless eyes. The military council chamber proved to be a circular room dominated by a massive holographic display in its center. Tiered seating surrounded it, currently occupied by 24 senior Australis officers. Queen Ilaria sat on an elevated throne, her expression impassive. General Thorm stood at a primary position, his ornate armor gleaming. His eyes tracked Wright and Niara as they entered, a predatory satisfaction evident in his gaze. The princess and her consort honor us with their presence, Thorm announced, his voice carrying a subtle mockery that caused several council members to shift uncomfortably. Niara inclined her head slightly. The princess and Major Wright attend as requested, General. They took their assigned positions, standing before the council, rather than seated among them. Wright recognized the subtle power play, positioning them as subjects for examination rather than participants. Thorm activated the central display, which showed rotating images of Wright and Niara in the arena during yesterday's challenge. Esteemed colleagues, we face an unprecedented situation, Thorm began. For the first time in our recorded history, a royal heir has been claimed in combat by an off-worlder. He paused, allowing the significance to settle. This raises profound questions about the proposed Earth alliance. An older female general spoke up. Questions of what nature precisely? Thorm paced slowly around the display. Questions of compatibility, General Vex. Of understanding. The human clearly had no knowledge of our sacred traditions when he claimed the princess. His gaze fixed on Wright. Isn't that correct, Major? All eyes turned to Wright. He maintained the calm demeanor that had served him through countless high-pressure situations. I entered the challenge with one goal, proving humanity's worthiness as allies against the Draxan threat. The bond of conquest was neither sought nor expected. Yet you claimed it, Thorm pressed, took what was not offered. Wright felt Niara tense beside him. Before she could speak, he responded evenly. I accepted a challenge issued by your council general. I followed the rules as presented. If there were additional consequences, they were not disclosed to Earth's representatives beforehand. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Queen Ilaria's expression remained neutral, but Wright thought he detected a flicker of approval in her eyes. Thorm's jaw tightened momentarily before he recovered. This only highlights the cultural gulf between our peoples. How can we ally with those who do not understand our most sacred traditions? The same way we have allied with 12 other species across 3 star systems. Queen Ilaria finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. Through mutual respect and clear communication, neither of which were prioritized in yesterday's events. Thorm bowed to the queen, though the gesture seemed perfunctory. My queen speaks wisdom as always. Yet this situation is unique. The Princess Royal bound to an alien through combat rather than choice. The implications for succession alone are not the subject of today's discussion, Niara interrupted sharply. We face extinction at the hands of the Draxan. Earth faces the same threat. Alliance serves both our peoples regardless of personal complications. Another council member leaned forward. Yet how can we trust these humans? They send an elder as their representative who wins through endurance rather than strength. Is this deception a deliberate withholding of their true capabilities? Wright recognized the opening. Counselor, I am not Earth's strongest warrior. I am simply one who has survived long enough to learn that victory doesn't always go to the strongest or fastest, but often to the most adaptable. He stepped forward, addressing the entire council. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats throughout our history, not from space, but from our own world. Ice ages plagues global conflicts. Each time we survived, not through overwhelming power, but through intelligence, cooperation, and sheer stubborn persistence. The council chamber had gone silent, all eyes fixed on the small human who spoke with unexpected authority. The Draxan threat is real. Wright continued. Earth needs Astralis technology to survive it, but Astralis needs what humanity offers as well. Different tactical approaches, different ways of thinking. My victory over Princess Niara wasn't deception. It was demonstration. Niara stepped forward to stand beside him. Major Wright speaks truth. I underestimated him based on size and age. The Draxan will make the same mistake, unless we teach them otherwise together. Queen Ilaria nodded slightly. Well said, daughter. She rose, commanding immediate attention. The bond of conquest stands as tradition demands. But our focus must remain on the greater threat. General Thorm, you will proceed with alliance negotiations as previously planned. Thorm's expression darkened momentarily before he masked it with a bow. As my queen commands. However, protocol dictates that the bonded pair complete the traditional isolation period before formal negotiations can resume. Wright noted the subtle victory in Thorm's voice. More delays, more opportunities to undermine the alliance. Queen Ilaria's eyes narrowed slightly. 3 days as tradition requires, no more. During this time, Princess Niara will ensure Major Wright receives appropriate cultural briefings to prevent further misunderstandings. Of course, Mother, Niara bowed formally. As the council session adjourned, Wright and Niara were escorted back to their chambers, the same guards maintaining protective positions around them. Once alone, Niara's formal demeanor dropped overwhelm. Thorm still holds advantage. 3 days gives him time to consolidate support against the alliance. Wright moved to the window thinking. Then we use these 3 days to outmaneuver him. How we're confined to these chambers. Physically, yes. Wright turned to face her. But we need information connections. You know who Thorm's allies are who might be persuaded to support the alliance instead. Niara studied him with new interest. You think like a tactician. I was one for many years. During the scud hunting operations in Desert Storm, our team had to gather intelligence, identify patterns, and exploit weaknesses, all while remaining undetected behind enemy lines. For the first time, Niara's eyes reflected genuine interest. Tell me about these operations. We operated at night using thermal imaging to identify missile launcher heat signatures. The Iraqi forces moved their launchers daily, but they followed patterns, staying near certain roads, reusing launch sites. By tracking these patterns, we could predict movements and direct airstrikes without engaging directly. Niara nodded slowly. Economy of force, minimum risk, maximum impact. Exactly. We need the same approach here. He gestured to the communication panel. Zorn is sympathetic to our cause. We can use him as a conduit to potential allies. Something like respect showed in Niara's expression. Perhaps you are more than you appear, Major Wright. Most people are, he replied simply. A chime indicated an incoming communication. Niara activated the panel to reveal Director Collins' face. Major Wright, Princess Niara. Collins nodded to each in turn. I've been briefed on the unexpected developments. Are you both well? As well as can be expected, Director, Wright responded. The situation is complicated but not unsalvageable. Collins' expression remained professional, though Wright could read the concern beneath. Earth's position remains unchanged. Alliance with Australis is crucial for planetary defense. Whatever personal arrangements are necessary to secure that alliance are authorized. The diplomatic phrasing wasn't lost on either Wright or Niara. Understood, Director, Wright replied. We're navigating local politics as best we can. General Thorm remains the primary obstacle. Our xenologists are working overtime to provide cultural context, Collins said. Apparently, this bond of conquest is rarely invoked in modern Australis society. There may be technical loopholes we haven't yet identified. Niara stepped forward. Your experts are correct, Director Collins. The bond is archaic from our more warlike past. But while it exists, it must be honored, at least in public appearance. Collins nodded thoughtfully. I see. Then we proceed carefully, working within the constraints while seeking a long-term solution. She turned her attention fully to Wright. Major, we're counting on your adaptability. The Joint Chiefs send their regards and their confidence in your ability to handle this unexpected turn. Tell them I've been in worse spots, Wright replied with the ghost of a smile, though not by much. After the communication ended, Niara turned to Wright. Your leaders seem pragmatic. Survival requires pragmatism. Earth can't afford pride or prejudice in the face of extinction. Niara activated the information display, bringing up the palace layout. If we are to counter Thorm effectively, you need to understand Australis politics and culture, not just the superficial briefings you receive before arrival. For the next several hours, she educated Wright on the complex interplay of military and royal authority within Australis society. The military council held tremendous influence, but ultimately answered to the Queen, a balance maintained through tradition and mutual respect. Thorm believes my mother has grown too progressive, Niara explained, highlighting various council members and their affiliations. Too willing to form alliances rather than conquering, as in our past. And what do you believe, Wright asked. Niara paused, seeming surprised by the question. I was raised as a warrior first. Conquest is in our blood, our history. She met Wright's gaze directly. But I have also seen the cost of constant warfare. The Draxan threat has made me question whether any single species can stand alone. Wright nodded, recognizing the political complexity behind her words. On Earth, we learned that lesson through 2 devastating world wars. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought against our own nature. A subtle shift occurred in Niara's demeanor, a slight softening perhaps. You speak with the wisdom of experience, Major Wright. Call me James, he offered. Seems appropriate given our situation. The slightest hint of amusement touched her features. James, then, though such familiarity would shock the court. I think we're past worrying about shocking the court. Their conversation was interrupted by Zorn's arrival with the evening meal. As he arranged the food, the attendant leaned close to Niara. Princess, there are rumors of unusual troop movements. General Thorm has dispatched forces to the outer defense perimeter beyond his authority to do so without council approval. Niara's expression darkened. How many ships? 3 battlecruisers. Officially for training exercises. When Zorn departed, Wright turned to Niara. Training exercises that weren't mentioned in the council meeting. Precisely. Niara activated another display showing the Australis Defense Network. These movements make no tactical sense unless he's creating a deliberate gap in your defenses. Wright finished studying the display with a strategist's eye. Here and here, removing ships from these coordinates creates a blind spot in your early warning system. Niara stared at him. How could you know our defense protocols? I don't need to. Basic strategic principles apply across species. If I wanted to create a vulnerability without appearing to do so, this is exactly how I'd position it. Wright pointed to specific areas of the display. What's beyond this sector? Nothing of significance. A mining outpost, some research facilities. Niara's eyes suddenly widen. And a deep space communication relay. Understanding passed between them. He's creating a back channel, Wright said quietly. A way to communicate without palace oversight. But with whom? Niara began accessing additional data, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls. The Draxan are our sworn enemies. Sometimes the greatest threat comes from within, Wright observed. In my experience, ambitious generals rarely act alone. They work together through the evening, mapping troop movements and communication patterns. Wright brought his decades of military intelligence experience to bear, identifying anomalies that might have escaped notice individually, but formed a pattern when viewed collectively. By midnight, a disturbing picture had emerged. Thorm wasn't simply opposing the alliance politically, he appeared to be positioning military assets for a potential coup. He wouldn't dare move against Mother directly, Niara said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. The royal bloodline is sacred. The power has its own allure, Wright replied grimly. I've seen similar patterns before in Earth's more unstable regions. Create a crisis position as the solution, seize control in the name of security. Niara paced the chamber, her warrior's instincts clearly on edge. We must warn Mother. But without proof, Thorm will dismiss our concerns as paranoia, or worse, an attempt to distract from our own situation. Then we need proof. Wright studied the communication systems. On Earth, we'd monitor suspicious communications, track resource allocations, follow the money. We cannot access such systems from these chambers. We are isolated by tradition until the bond period ends. Wright smiled slightly. Tradition keeps us in these rooms, but are the rooms themselves traditional? Niara looked puzzled. What do you mean? These quarters were prepared hastily for our unusual situation. A human Astralis bonded pair wasn't planned for. He gestured to the various accommodations made for his smaller stature. If they modified the physical space, understanding dawned in Niara's eyes. They may have overlooked security protocols. She moved to an access panel near the sleeping quarters. Royal chambers have priority overrides built into their systems. If these were converted from standard royal quarters. Her fingers moved over the panel in a complex sequence. The display flickered, then changed to show a different interface, one clearly not meant for ordinary access. We have limited monitoring capabilities, she said with grim satisfaction. Not enough to access restricted military communications, but enough to track movement patterns within the palace. Wright finished studying the new display, and that might be exactly what we need. They spent the next hour establishing a surveillance net using the limited access available to them. It wasn't comprehensive, but it would alert them to unusual gatherings or movements among Thorm's known allies. As they worked, Wright noticed a subtle change in Niara's demeanor toward him. A growing respect, perhaps even the beginnings of trust. Their shared purpose had begun to bridge the vast gulf between them. When they finally paused, exhaustion evident in both their postures, Niara turned to Wright with an evaluative gaze. You've fought in wars, been captured, survived, yet you still serve. Why? The question caught Wright by surprise. He considered it carefully before answering. Because someone has to. Because the skills I have, the things I've learned through hard experience, can help protect those who can't protect themselves. He met her gaze steadily. I've seen what happens when good people stand aside and let power-hungry individuals take control. The cost is always paid by the innocent. Niara nodded slowly. On this, our species may not be so different. People rarely are at their core, Wright replied. Different methods, different strengths, but similar motivations. Perhaps that is why you unsettle Thorm so deeply. You are alien yet comprehensible. Wright smiled slightly. I'll take that as a compliment. As they prepared to rest for the night, their surveillance system suddenly activated. An alert flashed on the main display. Significant movement in the palace's secure levels. They rushed to the console. The limited feed showed groups of armed guards moving with purpose through restricted corridors. Those aren't royal guards, Niara said tensely. Those are Thorm's personal battalion. Wright studied their movements. They're establishing control points at key junctions. Classic first step in a military takeover. Niara's expression hardened into battle readiness. It's happening now. Thorm is making his move. Before they could process further, the chamber door burst open. Guards rushed in, weapons raised. But these wore the royal insignia, not Thorm's markings. Princess, the lead guard bowed hastily. Forgive the intrusion. The Queen commands your immediate presence. The palace is under lockdown. Niara grabbed her ceremonial weapon from its display. What has happened? Assassination attempt, Your Highness, against the Queen. Wright and Niara exchanged a look of shared understanding. Thorm had accelerated his timeline. And the Queen, Niara demanded, already moving toward the door. Secure but wounded, she asks for you both. The guard eyed Wright uncertainly. The human as well. Major Wright comes with me, Niara stated firmly. No guard dared question her. As they hurried through corridors now alive with armed personnel and flashing security alerts, Wright maintained tactical awareness, noting positions, weapons, potential choke points. Years of combat experience had hardened these reactions into instinct. Thorm miscalculated, he said quietly to Niara as they moved. A direct attempt against the Queen will unite those who might otherwise have supported him. Unless he succeeds completely, she replied grimly. If Mother dies, the succession crisis plays directly into his hands, especially with me compromised by our bond. Wright understood the implications. The assassination attempt was either a desperate error or part of a more complex strategy they hadn't yet identified. Either way, they were now moving directly into danger toward whatever endgame Thorm had planned. And somewhere in that chaos lay the future of two worlds. The Royal Medical Chamber hummed with tense energy. Queen Ilaria lay on a regeneration platform, her jade skin paler than normal. Medical technicians worked silently monitoring equipment that pulsed with alien technology. Her wound, a precision energy burn across her shoulder and chest, glowed faintly beneath transparent healing membranes. Niara rushed to her mother's side, her warrior's composure momentarily broken by the sight of the wounded queen. Mother, she whispered, dropping to one knee beside the platform. The queen's eyes opened sharp despite her injury. Daughter. Her gaze shifted past Niara to Wright. An Earth son? Good. Both of you safe. Wright stood respectfully back, allowing the royal family their moment. His tactical mind, however, was already assessing the situation. Security positions, entry points, vulnerabilities. The room was well defended, but in his experience, no defense was impenetrable. What happened? Niara demanded, her voice tight with controlled fury. Queen Ilaria's expression hardened. Treachery. The assassin wore royal guard markings but moved like Thorm's elite. They struck during the evening council review. And Thorm, conveniently absent, the Queen replied bitterly, called away moments before by an urgent security matter. Wright stepped forward. Your Majesty, with respect, this attack changes everything. General Thorm has moved beyond political maneuvering to open treason. The Queen studied Wright with penetrating eyes. You speak bluntly for one so new to our world, Major. But yes, you are correct. She struggled to sit more upright, ignoring the protests of her medical attendants. Niara, the council is divided. Some believe Thorm's claim that Earth agents are responsible for the attack. Niara's head snapped up. Earth agents, absurd. Yet effective, Wright interjected. A perfect way to derail the alliance and justify military action. He turned to the Queen. Your Majesty, based on movement patterns we observed before the attack, Thorm appears to be positioning for a coup, not just an assassination. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Explain. Wright outlined their observations. The troop movements, the communication relay vulnerability, the security redeployments. As he spoke, the Queen's expression grew increasingly grave. This is worse than I feared, she said when he finished. Thorm controls too many key defensive positions now. A direct confrontation would risk civil war. Then we need evidence, Wright stated firmly. Proof of his treachery that not even his supporters can deny. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Perhaps I can help with that. They turned to see Zorn entering, his typically calm demeanor replaced by visible tension. He carried a small data crystal in his hand. Zorn, the Queen acknowledged. Speak freely. The attendant bowed. My Queen, I have served the royal house for 3 generations. In that capacity, I have maintained certain information channels that are not widely known. Wright exchanged a glance with Niara. Their elderly guide was apparently more than he seemed. Zorn approached, offering the crystal to the Queen. This contains recorded communications between General Thorm and representatives of the Draxon Collective. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. The Draxon, the very enemy Astralis most feared, the civilization they had been at war with for generations. The Draxon saw him. Niara's voice was barely controlled outrage. Thorm conspires with World Eaters. Zorn nodded grimly. The communications are coded but clear enough. Thorm has promised the Draxon uncontested access to Earth in exchange for Astralis sovereignty and certain technological exchanges. Wright felt cold fury building inside him. Earth was being sacrificed as a bargaining chip, billions of lives traded for one general's ambition. He sells a world he fears might one day rival Astralis, the Queen said softly, pragmatic in his twisted way, but not yet proven. Wright pointed out military practicality overriding emotion. This crystal is evidence, but Thorm could claim it's fabricated. We need him to reveal himself, Nira agreed, to show his true allegiance before witnesses who cannot be dismissed. The Queen's eyes held a dangerous gleam. Then we shall provide the opportunity. She turned to Wright. Major, your Earth tactical mind has proven valuable. How would you draw a traitor into the open? Wright considered carefully, decades of special operations experience informing his response. With the right bait, Your Majesty, something he cannot resist. He paused. Or someone. Understanding passed between them. The Queen nodded slowly. I will appear to weaken from my injuries. News will spread that succession protocols are being initiated, forcing Thorm to accelerate his timeline. Niara continued, following Wright's logic. He cannot allow a legitimate succession while I remain your heir, which means he must act against both of you, Wright finished. But we'll be ready. The Queen's expression was that of a seasoned tactician. Zorn spread the word through trusted channels. My condition deteriorates. The Royal Council gathers tonight to discuss succession. It's dangerous, Nira warned. Thorm will come with force. All battle carries risk, daughter. The Queen's voice carried the authority that had ruled Astralis for a century. But we fight on ground of our choosing, not his. Wright recognized the strategy, one he had employed himself in past operations. Control the battlefield, predict the enemy's moves, and turn their strength against them. We'll need to coordinate palace security, he said. Identify which guards remain loyal, position them strategically. I will see to it, Zorn said, bowing once more before departing on his mission. As preparations began, Wright found himself pulled into intense planning sessions. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had transformed into a covert operation with planetary stakes. It felt familiar. The tension, the focused energy, the life-or-death calculations. Hours later, Wright stood with Niara in a preparation chamber adjacent to the Grand Council Hall. Royal guards, only those personally loyal to the Queen, checked weapons and communication devices. The trap was set. You should remain here, Niara said, adjusting her ceremonial armor. This is not your battle. Wright looked up at her, meeting her gaze steadily. Earth's fate hangs in the balance. That makes it precisely my battle. She studied him, something shifting in her expression. You are not what I expected, James Wright. What did you expect? A diplomat playing at warrior. Instead, I find a warrior playing at diplomat. Her mouth curved in the ghost of a smile. It is not unpleasant to be surprised. Before Wright could respond, a guard approached. Princess Major, the council assembles. General Thorm arrives with an unusually large security contingent. Niara's expression hardened into battle readiness. Then we proceed as planned. They moved toward the council hall, guards forming a protective formation around them. Wright's hand rested near the small Astralis sidearm he'd been provided. Unfamiliar technology, but he had adapted quickly during their brief preparation time. The massive doors to the council hall swung open. Inside, the circular chamber was already half filled with Astralis officials. The Queen's ceremonial throne at the chamber's head remained conspicuously empty, part of their ruse. General Thorm stood near the center of the hall, surrounded by officers wearing his personal insignia. His massive frame seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. Princess Niara, he called out, his voice carrying a false concern. We had not expected your attendance given the Queen's grave condition. Niara stepped forward, head high. My place is with the Council at this critical time, General, as is yours. Wright remained slightly behind her, assessing the room with a veteran's eye. Thorm had positioned his loyalists near all major exits. The gallery above held additional armed figures trying to appear inconspicuous. Classic ambush positioning. And you bring your Earth consort, Thorm continued to sneer in his voice. How appropriate that he should witness Astralis tradition in this difficult hour. Wright met the general's gaze calmly. I wouldn't miss it, General. Council members continued to arrive, taking their positions in the tiered seating. Wright noted the subtle divisions. Those who stood near Thorm, those who maintained distance, those who looked confused or concerned. Political fault lines were becoming visible. An elderly Astralis in ceremonial robes stepped to the central position. This emergency session of the Royal Council is convened. His voice quavered slightly with age but carried authority. In light of Queen Ilaria's condition, we must address contingency protocols. Thorm moved forward. High Counselor, I request permission to present a matter of urgent security before succession discussions begin. Proceed, General. Thorm gestured and one of his officers activated the central holographic display. Images appeared, doctored footage showing what appeared to be human vessels attacking Astralis outposts. Evidence has come to light of Earth treachery, Thorm declared. These attacks occurred simultaneously with the attempt on our Queen's life. The connection is undeniable. Murmurs rippled through the council. Wright remained expressionless, though internally he noted the crude manipulation. The footage showed vessels of completely different design than anything Earth possessed. Niara stepped forward. These images are falsified, council members. Earth possesses no ships capable of reaching our outposts, let alone attacking them. The princess defends her consort's world, Thorm countered smoothly. As expected, but her judgment is compromised by the bond of conquest. Wright spoke, his voice cutting through the growing tension. Those vessels bear no resemblance to Earth technology, General. Anyone with basic knowledge of our capabilities would recognize that. Thorm's eyes narrowed. You claim expertise in Astralis military intelligence, human. I claim expertise in recognizing a frame job, General. I've seen better attempts. A dangerous silence fell over the chamber. Thorm's hand moved subtly, a signal to his officers. Your Majesty, Niara called out suddenly, looking toward the chamber entrance. You honor us with your presence. All heads turned as Queen Ilaria entered, moving slowly but with regal bearing. Her wounds were hidden beneath formal robes, her expression revealing nothing of the pain she surely felt. Confusion flashed across Thorm's face before he masked it with a bow. My queen, we had been told your condition was critical. Reports of my decline were premature. The queen moved to her throne, each step deliberate. Please continue, General. You were presenting evidence of Earth aggression. Thorm hesitated, his carefully orchestrated scenario disrupted by the queen's appearance. Yes, Your Majesty, as you can see. What I see, the queen interrupted, is fabricated footage that insults the intelligence of this council. Before Thorm could respond, the chamber doors sealed with a heavy thud. Royal guards moved to strategic positions around the perimeter. The trap was closing. What is the meaning of this? Thorm demanded, his hand moving to his weapon. The queen's voice rang out clear and commanding. General Thorm, you stand accused of high treason against the throne of Astralis, of conspiracy with the Draxan Collective, of attempted regicide. Shock rippled through the council members. Some rose to their feet in alarm. Others looked to Thorm, seeking denial or explanation. Thorm's expression darkened. Baseless accusations, my queen, brought by an Earth agent who has already compromised our royal line. His hand closed around his weapon. I act only to protect Astralis from those who would weaken us through misguided alliance. Then you deny communication with Draxan representatives. The queen activated a control on her throne arm. Zorn's recorded evidence played through the chamber's audio system. Thorm's voice unmistakable, discussing Earth's vulnerability, negotiating its sacrifice for Astralis' advantage and his personal gain. For a moment, genuine shock registered on Thorm's face. Then it hardened into cold resolve. So be it. He drew his weapon fully. I had hoped to preserve the appearance of legitimacy, but time grows short. The Draxan fleet approaches the outer reaches of our system even now. His loyalists throughout the chamber drew weapons simultaneously. Council members dove for cover as energy beams sizzled through the air. Wright moved with combat-honed reflexes, pulling Niara behind a massive stone column as weapons fire erupted around them. The Queen's guards returned fire, creating a chaotic crossfire throughout the chamber. "The coup begins," Niara growled, drawing her ceremonial blade, which Wright noted contained a very functional energy emitter along its edge. "And ends," Wright replied grimly. He activated his communication device. Zorn executes secondary protocols. Throughout the palace, loyal guards who had been strategically positioned began moving against Thorm's forces. The Queen had prepared well, ensuring her loyalists were ready when the general made his move. In the council chamber, Thorm barked orders to his officers. "Secure the Queen, the rest of you with me to the command center. The Draxon signal must be sent." Wright caught Niara's eye. "The signal? He's activating something to help the Draxon fleet." "The defense grid," she realized. "If he lowers it from Central Command, Earth won't be their only target." Wright finished. "He's selling out both our worlds." They exchanged a look of perfect understanding. Without words, a plan formed between them. The kind of instant tactical communion Wright had experienced only with his most seasoned combat teams. "I'll protect the Queen," Niara said, already moving toward her mother's position. "Stop, Thorm." Wright nodded once and broke cover, moving low and fast across the chamber. His smaller size, once mocked by the Astralis, now proved advantageous as he navigated the chaos with practiced efficiency. Thorm and a group of loyalists were forcing their way toward a side exit. Wright followed, maintaining distance, using the combat skills honed across decades to remain undetected. The general's focus was forward, his tactical awareness compromised by rage and urgency. As they reached a service corridor, Wright activated his communication device again. "Zorn Thorm moves towards Central Command. Clear all civilians from that sector." "Understood, Major," came the reply. "Be advised, Thorm's personal guard includes 5 elite warriors. Even for Astralis, they are exceptionally dangerous." Wright continued his pursuit, staying just far enough behind to avoid detection. The palace corridors became less ornate and more functional as they approached the military command center. Security checkpoints lay deactivated or destroyed. Thorm had prepared his route well. The command center itself was a fortified structure within the palace complex. As Wright approached, he could see Thorm's group had already breached the outer security perimeter. Bodies of loyal guards lay where they had fallen, attempting to defend their posts. Wright paused, assessing. Frontal assault would be suicide, but he hadn't survived 3 decades of special operations by taking the obvious approach. Moving to a maintenance access panel he'd memorized during their planning sessions, Wright slipped into the mechanical infrastructure that serviced the command center. Narrow tunnels designed for robotic maintenance units proved navigable for his human frame, another unexpected advantage of his smaller stature. Inside the command center, Thorm worked furiously at the main control interface. Holographic displays showed the Astralis defense network, and beyond it, approaching at high speed, the unmistakable signature of a Draxon battle fleet. "Disengage security protocols," Thorm commanded. "Authorization, Thorm Prime Alpha." "Security protocols disengage," responded the automated system. "Defense grid control enabled." Wright positioned himself carefully behind a massive power conduit, observing. Thorm's elite guards maintained security positions around the center's perimeter. The general himself stood exposed at the main console, but reaching him meant crossing open ground under the watch of 5 highly trained warriors. Wright assessed his options with the cold calculation of a veteran operative. Direct confrontation wasn't feasible. But disruption? That was always an option. He targeted the power distribution node nearby. One well-placed shot would temporarily disrupt systems throughout the command center, creating confusion, darkness, opportunity. Taking careful aim with his Astralis sidearm, Wright fired. The energy burst struck the node, directly causing a cascade of electrical failures. Emergency lighting kicked in, significantly dimmer than standard illumination. In the momentary confusion, Wright moved. Years of night operations had taught him to use darkness as an ally. He took out the nearest guard with a precision strike to a nerve cluster Niara had identified during their preparations, an Astralis vulnerability similar to human pressure points. The guard collapsed silently. One down. "Security breach," shouted another guard. "Perimeter compromised." Thorm didn't look up from his work. "Handle it. I need 3 more minutes to lower the grid sectors." Wright moved again, staying low, using equipment and consoles as cover. The guards fanned out, searching methodically, but hampered by the emergency lighting. A second guard moved past Wright's position. Another precisely placed strike, Another silent takedown. Two down. But the third guard spotted the movement. Energy weapons fire erupted, sizzling past Wright's head, close enough to singe his hair. He rolled behind a massive computation unit, return fire striking the guard in the shoulder. The injured guard bellowed in pain, an alarm more effective than any electronic system. The remaining two guards converged on Wright's position, firing continuously. Wright retreated, seeking better cover. The guard's superior knowledge of the command center gave them advantage, herding him toward a corner with diminishing options. A wild shot struck near Wright's position, causing secondary explosions as sensitive equipment overloaded. Acrid smoke filled the chamber, adding to the confusion. Wright seized the opportunity, activating an emergency ventilation override he'd noted on the center schematic. Powerful air currents suddenly swept through the chamber, dispersing the smoke but also creating a momentary distraction. He moved decisively, targeting the injured guard first. A running slide brought him within range to sweep the Astralis's legs, bringing the massive warrior crashing down. A follow-up strike to the head rendered him unconscious. Three down. The fourth guard fired wildly through the swirling air currents. Wright ducked behind a massive server bank, energy bolts impacting around him. Equipment exploded, showering the area with sparks and debris. Wright counted the shots. The Astralis weapon would require recalibration after 6 continuous discharges. As the sixth shot sizzled past, he broke cover closing distance before the guard could reset his weapon. The Astralis warrior switched to hand-to-hand combat, his massive fist swinging toward Wright's head with bone-crushing force. Wright slipped beneath the blow, using the guard's momentum against him, a technique from his close-quarters combat training. The guard staggered off balance. Wright struck precisely at the base of the Astralis's neck, targeting a nerve cluster Niara had described. The guard dropped instantly. 4 down. The fifth guard, recognizing the threat Wright posed, retreated to protect Thorm directly. The general continued working at the console, now visibly agitated by the disruptions. Defense Grid Sector 7 disengaging, announced the automated system. Sector 8 disengaging. Earth lay beyond Sector 12. Thorm was systematically opening the path for the Draxan fleet. Enough of this, Thorm growled. He turned from the console, drawing at his ceremonial blade, which, like Niara's, contained a functional energy emitter. Kill the human. The final guard charged Wright, weapon raised. Wright evaded the first attack, but found himself driven back by the guard's superior reach and strength. This warrior was more skilled than the others, his movements disciplined and precise. Wright felt his aging body protesting as he narrowly avoided lethal strikes. A glancing blow caught his shoulder, searing pain where the energy edge made contact. He stumbled, momentarily vulnerable. The guard pressed his advantage weapon, raised for a killing blow. A blur of movement interrupted the attack. The guard's head snapped back as a powerful blow struck him from behind. He crumpled to reveal Niara standing there, her own ceremonial blade glowing with energy. "I thought you were protecting the queen." Wright managed, pressing a hand to his wounded shoulder. "Mother is secure. The palace is ours." Niara's eyes narrowed as she assessed his injury. "You are wounded." "I'll live." Wright nodded toward the console where Thorm had resumed his work. "But Earth might not. He's lowering the defense grid for the Draxan fleet." Niara's expression hardened. "Then we stop him. Together." Thorm turned from the console, weapon ready. "Princess," he sneered, "come to die alongside your human pet. How fitting." "The only death today will be yours, traitor," Niara replied, advancing steadily. Thorm laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "You cannot defeat me, princess. I trained you. I know every technique you possess." "Perhaps," Niara glanced at Wright, "but he has shown me new ways to fight." They attacked simultaneously, Niara directly, Wright circling to flank. Thorm responded with astonishing speed for his size, his blade a blur of lethal energy as he parried Niara's attack while kicking a massive console into Wright's path. Wright vaulted the obstacle, coming in low, while Niara engaged Thorm high. The general was forced to defend from 2 directions, his superior skill tested by their coordinated assault. "Defense Grid Sector 10 disengaging," announced the system. "Sector 11 disengaging." Earth was next. Time was running out. Thorm fought with the desperate fury of a cornered predator, his blows powerful enough to shatter equipment when they missed their intended targets. Niara matched his intensity, her royal training evident in every move. Wright stayed mobile, using his smaller size and quickness to harass Thorm's flanks, preventing the general from focusing solely on Niara. It was a tactic Wright had employed against larger opponents throughout his career. Create confusion, divide attention, exploit openings. You fight like an insect, Thorm snarled at Wright, stinging, retreating. No honor. Wright didn't waste breath on response. Honor wouldn't save Earth. Results would. An opening appeared as Thorm committed to a powerful overhead strike against Niara. Wright darted in, targeting the same nerve cluster he'd used on the guards. His strike landed perfectly, but Thorm had anticipated the move. Though his left arm went momentarily numb, he pivoted with shocking speed, his blade slashing across Wright's chest. White-hot pain erupted as the energy edge cut through clothing and into flesh. Wright fell back severely wounded. Blood soaked his torn uniform. The room swam around him as shock set in. James. Niara's cry seemed distant through the haze of pain. Thorm laughed triumphantly. See how easily your human falls. This is the species you would have us ally with. Wright fought to remain conscious, pressure the wound. Through blurring vision, he saw Niara attack with renewed fury, driving Thorm back toward the main console. Defense Grid Sector 12 preparing to disengage, announced the system. Earth's last protection was moments from falling. Wright forced himself to focus through the pain. The main power coupling for the defense grid control was visible from his position, exposed during the earlier battle damage. One well-placed shot could short-circuit Thorm's sabotage. He raised his weapon arm, trembling with effort. His vision doubled, then tripled. Focusing with supreme effort, Wright aligned the shot and fired. The energy bolt struck the coupling perfectly. Systems throughout the command center shorted out in a cascade of electrical failures. The defense grid controls locked down in emergency preservation mode. No, Thorm roared, momentarily distracted by the system failure. Niara seized the opening, her blade slashed in a perfect arc, striking with precision where armor joined flesh. Thorm staggered, disbelief crossing his features. You've learned new techniques. Indeed, he gasped, collapsing to his knees. Niara stood over him, blade poised for the killing blow. For the Queen, for Astralis. Her eyes flicked to Wright's bloodied form. And for Earth. The blade descended with finality. Wright's vision dimmed as he slumped against the wall, blood pooling beneath him. His final conscious thought was of the mission. Earth was safe, at least for now. The Alliance would proceed. As darkness closed in, he felt strong arms lift him. Niara's face swam above him, her expression unguarded for the first time, showing concern, fear something more complex. Stay with me, James, her voice commanded. That's an order, soldier. Earth needs you. A pause, then softer. I need you. The world faded to black. Regeneration was an interesting experience. Wright floated in a tank of luminescent, fluid healing technologies beyond human understanding, repairing his damaged body. Through the transparent walls, he could see medical technicians monitoring his progress. Time became fluid, impossible to track. He drifted in and out of consciousness, memories blending with present reality. Desert Storm operations in his youth, the scud hunting missions across hostiles' territory, the hostage extraction that had earned him the Silver Star, training new operatives before his retirement, and most recently, the challenge with Niara, the coup attempt, the desperate battle in the command center. When full consciousness finally returned, Wright found himself on a recovery platform similar to the one where he'd seen the wounded Queen. His chest bore a fresh scar, remarkably small considering the severity of the wound he remembered. The hero awakens, came a familiar voice. Wright turned his head to see Queen Ilaria approaching, fully recovered from her own injuries. Beside her walked Niara, her expression unreadable. Your Majesty. Wright attempted to sit up, wincing at residual pain. Remain still, Major Wright. You have earned your rest. The Queen's voice held genuine warmth. Astralis owes you a debt that cannot easily be repaid. Earth's safety is payment enough, Wright replied. The Draxon fleet retreated when their agent failed, Niara answered. They are not prepared to face our full defensive capabilities without Thorm's promised access. Relief flooded through Wright. The mission, protecting Earth, had succeeded, though not in the way anyone had anticipated. And the Alliance, he asked. Queen Ilaria smiled. The military council has unanimously approved formal alliance with Earth. Your actions proved humanity's worth more effectively than any diplomatic exchange could have. Wright nodded satisfaction, warming him despite the lingering pain. And General Thorm's supporters, those who actively participated in the coup, have been detained, Niara said. Others, who merely followed misguided loyalty, are being evaluated individually. A medical technician approached, spoke quietly to the Queen, then departed. It seems you are recovering well, Major, the Queen said. The physicians believe you can be moved to more comfortable quarters tomorrow. Thank you, Your Majesty. The Queen's expression grew more serious. There remains the matter of the bond of conquest between you and my daughter, a situation engineered by Thorm but binding nonetheless. Wright glanced at Niara, who met his gaze directly. Something had changed in her demeanor toward him, a respect, perhaps even an affection that hadn't existed before. I understand tradition is important, Your Majesty, but surely under these circumstances some accommodation can be. I have been researching our oldest laws, the Queen interrupted. The bond of conquest has existed since before recorded history, but there is one aspect Thorm deliberately obscured. Wright raised an eyebrow questioningly. The bond can indeed be dissolved, the Queen continued, when both parties achieve what our ancestors called the shared victory, fighting as one to overcome a greater threat. Understanding dawned. Our defeat of Thorm, Niara stepped forward. We fought as true battle mates, covering each other's weaknesses, amplifying each other's strengths. The ancient texts describe exactly such a partnership as transcending the need for the formal bond. The Queen nodded. The bond has served its purpose, bringing two warriors together who might otherwise have remained separated by prejudice and misunderstanding. What happens next is yours to decide, not traditions to demand. With that surprisingly modern interpretation, the Queen excused herself, leaving Wright and Niara alone. An awkward silence fell between them. Wright broke it first. So technically free of each other at last. Niara's mouth curved in a small smile. Technically. She moved closer to his recovery platform, studying him with those intense eyes. You saved my world, James Wright, and your own. We did, he corrected. Together. Yes. She hesitated, then continued. The Earth Alliance will require ongoing coordination, cultural exchange, military liaison. Wright understood the unspoken question. Are you offering me a job, Princess? I am suggesting, she said carefully, that the bond of conquest may have ended, but perhaps something else has begun. Before Wright could respond, a communication alert sounded. Director Collins's face appeared on the nearby screen. Major Wright, she said, relief evident in her voice. We've received word of your recovery. The Joint Chiefs send their highest commendations. Thank you, Director. Mission accomplished, though not exactly as planned. Collins smiled slightly. The best missions rarely go as planned, Major. You know that better than most. Her expression grew more serious. We're preparing for the formal alliance negotiations. Your presence will be required, both as Earth's representative and as the hero who made it possible. I'll be ready, Wright assured her. After the communication ended, Niara looked at Wright thoughtfully. Your leaders value you highly. I'm just a soldier who did his duty, Wright replied. The right person in the right place at the right time. You are more than that, Niara said softly. You have shown us that true strength comes in many forms, that wisdom and experience can overcome raw power. These are lessons Astralis needed to learn. Wright met her gaze. Perhaps our worlds have more to teach each other. Perhaps they do. She placed her hand gently on his, a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Rest now, James. Tomorrow we begin building something new. 1 year later, Major James Wright stood at the front of a training chamber facing 24 young Astralis warriors. Behind them in an observation gallery sat a group of human military officers, the first exchange contingent from Earth's Special Forces. Combat is not merely about power, Wright said, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. It is about adaptation, endurance, finding the opponent's weakness and exploiting it. He moved with surprising agility for a man approaching 70, demonstrating a technique that used an Astralis warrior's momentum against them. The young aliens watched with intense focus, a far cry from the dismissive attitude he'd first encountered on this world. Human combat philosophy differs from Australis tradition, Wright continued. We evolved as persistence hunters, tracking prey for days until exhaustion made them vulnerable. This shaped not just our bodies, but our tactical thinking. A young Australis warrior raised a massive hand. But our strength advantage cannot be ignored, Combat Master. How do we balance explosive power with your endurance techniques? Wright smiled at the title. Combat Master, an honored position in Australis society that had never before been given to an off-worlder. Excellent question. The key is not to replace one with the other, but to integrate both. He gestured to one of the human officers. Captain Reynolds will demonstrate a combined approach with Senior Warrior Krell. The human captain, a woman in her 30s, stepped forward to spar with the much larger Australis warrior. What followed was a demonstration of the new combat style emerging from the Alliance. Earth endurance and adaptability combined with Australis power and precision. As the class ended, Wright made his way to his private office. The room reflected his dual status, designed for Australis proportions, but containing human furnishings with military memorabilia from both worlds adorning the walls. The communication panel activated, revealing Niara's face. Unlike a year ago, her expression now softened instantly at the sight of him. How was today's class, Combat Master? Promising, Wright replied. The integration is happening faster than expected. Both sides are eager to learn. As it should be. Niara's position as military liaison director made her the perfect counterpart to Wright's role as combat master. Together, they were reshaping the military doctrine of two worlds. The Queen requests your presence at this evening's council. The Draxon situation has developed. Wright nodded. I'll be there. After the communication ended, he moved to the window overlooking the capital city. A year ago, he had stood at a similar window as a stranger in an alien world. Now he was respected, valued, even beloved by some. The door chimed and a medical attendant entered. Your daily scan, Combat Master. Wright submitted to the procedure with good grace. The advanced regenerative treatments had healed his wounds from the battle with Thorm, but at his age, ongoing monitoring was prudent, especially given his unique status as the only human permanently living on Australis. Your readings are excellent, the attendant reported. The cellular regeneration continues to stabilize. The princess will be pleased. Wright nodded, thinking of Niara. Their relationship had evolved slowly, deliberately, free from the bond of conquest, but strengthened by mutual respect and genuine affection. Cross-species romance wasn't something either had anticipated, but adaptation was what humans did best. The evening council session was focused on the latest Draxon movements. Since Thorm's defeat, the World Eaters had retreated to regroup, but intelligence suggested they were preparing a new offensive. As Wright entered the council chamber, heads turned respectfully. Queen Ilaria acknowledged him with a nod. Niara, seated at her mother's right hand, allowed a brief smile before resuming her formal demeanor. Major Wright, the Queen greeted him. We were discussing the new intelligence from the border sectors. I've reviewed the reports, Your Majesty, Wright replied, taking his designated seat, a position of honor unthinkable for an alien a year earlier. The Draxon have adapted their approach since our alliance became public. The council session proceeded with detailed strategic discussions. Wright's insights, born from decades of Earth military experience, were now valued alongside traditional Australis tactics. The blending of approaches had already strengthened both worlds' defenses. After the formal meeting, Wright found himself walking with Niara through the royal gardens, a quiet ritual they had established in recent months. The medical reports are good, she asked, her tone casual, but her eyes revealing deeper concern. Excellent, he assured her. The treatments continue to work better than expected. The advanced Australis medical technology was doing more than just maintaining his health. It was subtly enhancing his cellular structure, potentially extending his lifespan significantly. The implications for Earth medicine were enormous, just one of many benefits from the alliance. They reached a secluded alcove overlooking the capital's skyline, brilliantly lit against the deepening twilight. Here, away from official duties and watchful eyes, they could be simply James and Niara. I received an interesting communication from Earth today. Niara said, her voice softer in these private moments. Director Collins reports that the first group of human scientists has successfully adapted our regenerative technology for Earth medicine. Initial trials show promising results. Wright smiled. The alliance was already bearing fruit beyond military cooperation. That's excellent news. How many years did Earth medical researchers estimate it would take? 5 at minimum. They've achieved it in 1. Niara's hand found as the size difference no longer seeming strange to either of them. Your people adapt quickly. We've had to throughout our history. Wright gazed at the alien city that had become his home. Speaking of adaptation, how did the council react to the latest proposal? Niara's expression grew more serious. Mixed. The concept of a joint military academy, training humans and Astralis together from the beginning, is unprecedented. Some traditionalists remain skeptical, but not opposed. No, your demonstration with today's class has silenced many critics. The results speak for themselves. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. There is another matter. The medical division has completed their compatibility research. Wright turned to face her, fully knowing what this meant. Over the past months, Astralis scientists had been studying the biological compatibility between their species, research with profound implications for their personal relationship. And, he asked quietly, it is possible, Niara said, her voice betraying rare vulnerability, difficult, requiring significant medical intervention, but possible. The implications hung in the air between them. A child, a biological hybrid of human and Astralis, would be more than just a personal milestone. It would represent the ultimate symbol of their alliance, a physical embodiment of what their worlds could achieve together. Are you certain this is what you want? Wright asked. The political implications alone would be enormous. Niara's eyes, once cold and dismissive toward him, now held a depth of emotion that still surprised him. I am not proposing this for politics, James. I have lived as a warrior and a princess. I would like to live also as something more. Wright reached up his human hand, tracing the curve of her face, a gesture that would have been unthinkable during their first meeting in the arena. Then we should discuss it with the medical team. Thoroughly. Cautiously. Always the tactical thinker, she said with a smile. Planning even for this. Some habits are hard to break, he returned her smile, and have served us well. Their moment was interrupted by an alert from Wright's communication device. Combat Master, your presence is requested in the Southern Training Quadrant. The Earth contingent has arrived for evening exercises. Acknowledge, Wright replied. He turned back to Niara. Duty calls. Always does, she agreed. Go train our warriors. We'll continue this discussion later. As Wright made his way to the training quadrant, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. From retired Special Forces operative, working security in Nevada, to combat master on an alien world, architect of an interspecies alliance, and now potentially father to the first human Astralis child. The training quadrant buzzed with activity as human and Astralis soldiers practiced together. The size difference remained striking, but the two species had developed fighting techniques that leveraged their complementary strengths. Where the Astralis brought raw power and explosive speed, the humans contributed endurance, adaptability, and tactical flexibility. Wright observed with satisfaction as a young human lieutenant demonstrated a flanking maneuver to an Astralis squad. The alien warriors, once dismissive of human military capabilities, now listened with respect. Combat Master, the lieutenant acknowledged Wright's arrival with a salute. We're working on the combined assault protocols you developed. Carry on, Lieutenant, Wright replied. He moved through the training area, offering corrections and encouragement where needed. This, perhaps more than the high-level diplomatic work, was his true contribution, breaking down barriers between species through shared purpose and mutual respect. As evening training concluded, Wright found himself approached by one of the youngest Astralis warriors, barely into adulthood by their standards, though still towering over him. Combat Master, may I ask a personal question? The young warrior seemed uncertain, almost shy. Of course. You were already of advanced age by human standards when you came to our world. Yet you defeated our greatest warrior and helped save our civilization. The young Astralis hesitated. How did you know you could succeed when everything suggested failure? Wright considered the question carefully. It went to the heart of what he'd been trying to teach, not just combat techniques, but a philosophy of resilience. I didn't know, he answered honestly, but throughout my career I learned that certainty isn't a prerequisite for action. Sometimes you move forward simply because the alternative Doing nothing guarantees failure. The young warrior nodded slowly. Our traditions teach us to fight only battles we are certain to win. Your approach is different. It is, Wright agreed, and there's wisdom in both. The key is knowing which approach a situation demands. After dismissing the final training group, Wright made his way to the private quarters he now shared with Niara. The space had been redesigned to accommodate both species comfortably, a physical manifestation of their relationship's evolution. He found Niara reviewing holographic displays of defense system upgrades, work that never seemed to end even in their personal space. The Earth contingent is progressing well, he told her, settling into a chair designed for his human proportions. Lieutenant Chen's squad has fully integrated the combined assault protocols. Niara nodded, deactivating the displays. Good. The joint fleet exercises next month will be the true test. She moved to join him, her massive frame somehow graceful despite the confined space. The medical team has prepared initial protocols for the compatibility procedures. They wish to begin preliminary assessments tomorrow. Wright took her hand, still marveling at how natural the gesture now felt between them. Then we'll meet them together. Their quiet moment was interrupted by another communication alert, this one marked with the highest priority. Queen Ilaria's face appeared on the screen, her expression grave. James Niara, long-range sensors have detected a Draxan fleet, much larger than previous encounters. They have altered their approach to bypass our primary defense grid. Wright straightened immediately, tactical assessments already forming. ETA. 3 days, the Queen replied. The Council convenes in 1 hour. We'll need both of you. As the communication ended, Wright and Niara exchanged a look of perfect understanding. Whatever personal plans they had been discussing would have to wait. Duty called, to their positions, to their peoples, to the alliance they had forged. It seems our teachings will face their greatest test, Niara said, already moving to don her formal armor. Wright nodded, feeling the familiar focus of impending conflict settling over him. This was what he had trained for throughout his long career, preparing others to face overwhelming odds, finding strengths where others saw only weaknesses. They'll be ready, he said with quiet confidence. We've made sure of it. 6 months later, Wright stood on the observation deck of the Australis flagship Concordia, watching Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. The joint fleet had repelled the Draxan assault, though not without cost. Both human and Australis blood had been spilled defending their worlds, but the alliance had held, had grown stronger through shared sacrifice. Now, as Earth's special envoy, he was returning home to brief global leaders on the new defense protocols developed in the battle's aftermath. The Concordia, a massive vessel designed to accommodate both species, represented the next phase of their alliance joint operations throughout known space. Niara entered her ceremonial armor, replaced by the more practical uniform of the Joint Defense Command. She carried something Wright hadn't seen before, a data crystal pulsing with gentle light. The medical team completed their final compatibility assessment, she said without preamble. Even after a year together, directness remained her default. The procedures were successful. Wright's breath caught. During the chaos of the Draxan assault, their personal plans had been set aside. The compatibility treatments had continued when possible, but he'd had little hope of success given the circumstances. You mean? Niara nodded, a smile breaking through her warrior's composure. The genetic modification was successful. The procedures can begin whenever we're ready. Wright took the crystal, holding it carefully. Inside was the blueprint for something unprecedented. A viable embryo combining human and Australis DNA created from their genetic material. The medical team believes the child will inherit characteristics from both lineages. Niara continued, her voice softening. Our strength, your endurance, a true embodiment of our alliance. Wright looked from the crystal to Earth, growing larger in the view screen. Once he had been sent to Australis as humanity's last hope, an aging soldier on what many considered a suicide mission. Now he returned as part of something far greater, a bridge between worlds, a creator of new possibilities. What do the genetic profiles show? He asked. Niara's expression held pride and wonder in equal measure. The simulations predict a daughter with remarkable capabilities. She will have our physical strength, though somewhat diminished. But she will also have human adaptability and endurance, perhaps the most formidable combination possible. The first of a new generation, Wright mused, neither fully human nor fully Australis. But fully herself, Niara added, and living proof that our differences can become our greatest strengths when combined. As the Concordia began its approach to Earth's orbital station, where dignitaries from around the world waited to welcome them, Wright reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. From retired Special Forces operator to interplanetary diplomat to expectant father of a hybrid child who represented the future of two civilizations. "What are you thinking?" Niara asked, noting his expression. "That life never goes as planned," he answered honestly, "and that sometimes that's for the best." The Concordia began its docking procedures. The formal announcement of the pregnancy would be made during this visit, a symbol of the deep bond now forming between their worlds. "They will ask many questions," Niara said, "about the child, about us. Let them ask." Wright took her hand, still massive compared to his, but the difference no longer seemed important. "We've faced worse than curious politicians." As they prepared to disembark, Wright caught a glimpse of their reflection in the polished bulkhead, the aging human soldier and the towering alien warrior princess. An unlikely pair by any standard, yet something about it seemed right, proof that strength came in many forms. That experience could match youth wisdom, could overcome power, and that differences, when respected, could become sources of strength rather than division. The future stretched before them, uncertain but bright with possibility. Not just for them or their unborn child, but for two worlds now forever linked by bonds stronger than conquest. Bonds of mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine understanding. Earth had gained more than technology from this alliance. It had gained perspective. And Wright, in the twilight of his career, had found an unexpected new beginning. "Ready?" Niara asked as the docking sequence completed. Wright straightened, drawing on the military bearing that had served him through decades of service. "Ready." Together they stepped forward to meet whatever came next, not as conqueror and conquered, but as equals facing the future side by side. 2 years later, Wright stood before a mixed class of human and Australis cadets at the newly established Joint Defense Academy. At 70, he remained spry and vigorous, a testament to both Australis medical technology and his own iron determination. "The greatest lesson of our alliance," he told the assembled cadets, "is that true strength comes in many forms. The Australis bring power and precision. Humans bring endurance and adaptability. Together we are far stronger than either species alone." The cadets, 20 humans and 20 Australis, listened with rapt attention. They represented the first generation trained from the beginning to fight as a unified force, each learning to compensate for the other's weaknesses. "Combat Master," a young human cadet raised her hand. "How do we know when to apply Australis direct force tactics versus human asymmetric approaches?" Before Wright could answer, a small voice called from the entrance to the training hall. "Daddy." All heads turned to see a remarkable sight. A toddler barely 2 years old with skin the pale green of new leaves and eyes that held the sharp intelligence of both her lineages. Her size was smaller than an Australis child would be, but larger than a human of the same age. She broke free from her attendant and ran toward Wright with surprising speed. The combat master scooped up his daughter with practiced ease, balancing her on his hip. The cadets watched in amazement, many seeing the hybrid child for the first time. "Class, this unexpected visitor is Lyra," Wright said, his voice softening. "My daughter and living proof of what I was about to explain." He turned to the cadet who had asked the question. "You asked how to know which approach to use, direct force or asymmetric tactics. The answer is that the most effective strategy often combines elements of both." He gestured to Lyra, who was now studying the cadets with curious eyes. "Like my daughter, who has inherited strength from her mother's people and adaptability from mine, the most formidable warrior understands when to apply overwhelming force and when to employ patience and endurance." Niara appeared at the entrance, her commanding presence causing the cadets to snap to attention. "I apologize for the interruption, Combat Master. Someone insisted on seeing her father before her nap." Wright smiled. "No apology necessary, Director. Lyra has provided a perfect teaching moment." The child squirmed in his arms, clearly wanting to explore the training hall. As Wright set her down, the cadets watched in fascination as she moved with a fluid grace that combined human agility with Australis strength. "Observe," Wright told the class. At 2 years old, she already demonstrates capabilities neither species possesses naturally. Her Australis heritage gives her strength beyond any human child, while her human genetics provide flexibility and coordination that pure Australis lack at this age. A young Australis cadet spoke up, his voice reflecting awe. She truly represents the best of both worlds. As will all of you in your own way, Wright replied. Not through genetic combination, but through shared training and purpose. He gestured to Niara. Director Niara and I may have created one child who embodies our alliance, but you, all of you, are the true next generation. The ones who will carry forward what we've begun. As Niara led Lyra away, promising to return her after training, concluded, Wright turned back to his class. His expression grew more serious. The Draxan were repelled but not defeated. They will return, perhaps in our lifetime, perhaps in our children's. When they do, it will not be individual strength that saves us, not human or Australis. It will be our ability to function as something greater than the sum of our parts. He moved among the cadets, making eye contact with each in turn. The humans who had once seemed so small and weak to Australis eyes, the Australis who had once seemed too rigid and power-focused to humans. Learn from each other, he urged them. The tactics I teach are not purely human anymore, just as Director Niara's are not purely Australis. They are something new, an evolving approach that draws from both traditions but is bound by neither. After dismissing the class, Wright made his way to his office in the Academy's administrative wing. The walls were lined with mementos of his extraordinary journey. His original Delta Force insignia beside Australis military honors photographs of Earth landscapes alongside images of Australis cities, and at the center a portrait of Lyra on her first birthday flanked by her parents. Niara joined him there, their daughter now napping in the adjacent nursery. The council reports that the Adaptive Defense Network is fully operational, she said, settling into a chair designed for her proportions. Earth and Australis are now equally protected. Good, Wright nodded. And the Exploration Initiative? Approved. The first joint scientific mission launches next month. She studied him with the penetrating gaze that had once intimidated him, but now felt like home. You're thinking about something. He smiled. After 3 years together, she could read him like no one else ever had. I was thinking about that day in the arena. How certain I was that I was fighting for Earth's survival, nothing more. And instead you were fighting for a future neither of us could have imagined. Niara glanced toward the nursery where their daughter slept. The council has formally requested that Lyra be presented at the next high celebration, as a symbol of what our alliance has achieved. Wright considered this. Their daughter had already become something of an icon to both species, living proof that differences could be complementary rather than divisive. And what do you think? I think, Niara said carefully, that she is more than a symbol. She is our child. But I also think that seeing her might help others imagine possibilities they never considered. Wright nodded. It was a delicate balance. Their roles as public figures representing the alliance versus their desire to give their daughter as normal a childhood as possible, given her unique nature. We'll present her together, he decided. As a family, not as symbols. Niara smiled, reaching for his hand. Always finding the third option, James. Neither full compliance nor rejection, but something better. I learned from the best, he replied, squeezing her fingers gently. An adaptable human and a progressive Australis. How could our child be anything but extraordinary? As they sat together discussing plans for both their family and the continuing alliance, Wright reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had come to Australis as Earth's last hope, an aging soldier sent on what many considered a suicide mission. Instead, he had found not just a new purpose, but a new family, a new home that encompassed two worlds. The universe, it seemed, had one more mission for him, perhaps the most important of all. Not just to fight, not just to survive, but to build something that would outlast him. A bridge between worlds. A family that embodied the best of both. A legacy of unity forged from diversity. For a man who had spent his life preparing for the worst, it was an unexpected gift. The chance to help shape a future brighter than anyone could have imagined. And as he listened to his daughter's soft breathing from the next room, he knew it was a mission he would gladly accept.